Welcome to our webinar of how to submit your PPP application presented by Citizens Trust Bank. Without further ado, I'm actually going to turn over my time tonight to tonight's moderator, Fred Daniels, who will guide us through tonight's presentation, formally introduce himself, as well as our expert team of lending professionals. Thank you for putting your trust in Citizens Trust Bank.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Fred Daniels, and I am the Executive Vice President and Chief Credit Officer here at Citizens Trust Bank. On behalf of our Board of Directors, our CEO, Cynthia Day, and our bank associates, it's my pleasure to welcome you to Citizens Trust Bank's webinar, How to Submit Your PPP Loan Application. For those of you who are not aware, CTB was founded in 1921, and we're celebrating this year, 2021, 100 years of community partnerships and serving the needs of our customers and the community. The Paycheck Protection Program originated in April of 2020. And in the first round of funding, we funded over $30 million of PPP resources to small businesses throughout the community, both small and large. The second round began on January 11th, and with a little more than a month into the process, we're continuing to see a number of repetitive issues that are standing in the way of customers achieving their goal of receiving PPP financing. The people who will be presenting tonight, myself, Mr. Jones, and Mr. Bell, we're on the back end. We're the operational people making sure that customers get access to the resources that they need to be successful. And from that position that we're seeing, the repetitive issues, the problems that customers are encountering, we felt that it's time, although about a month in, to help those who have been through at least starting the application, or even those who've not even started the application, if you've not started, to have a webinar that gives you best practices and a clear understanding of what's being required for you to obtain a PPP loan. And that's where we stand this evening, as providing an opportunity for you to learn in a non-threatening environment that really should put you in a position at the end of our webinar that you feel confident that you can go through, complete our online application, and achieve your goal of funding. That's our goal for the evening. If you turn the page, we have two people who I mentioned earlier who will be helping us. Chris Jones is our Special Assets Officer. He has over 30 years of banking experience and works very closely with many customers for the PPP process. And then Jamal Bell, again, one of our senior underwriter and the senior officer of the bank, who's been with us for over 20 years, who is the point person for our PPP loan originations and approvals. So we are going to bring our collective knowledge this evening to you to help you again achieve approval of a PPP transaction. So our agenda this evening, you'll see that we're going to talk about some guidance to helping you complete and submit your application. The first being, what documents do I need? Second, what are the required documents for my business? Whether you're a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, or sole proprietorship, whether you own an LLC, an S Corp or a C Corp, or even in a partnership, we're going to talk about the documents you need no matter what your business status is. We're going to talk about some key tax filing expectations. We're going to talk about just getting organized. At the end of the day, PPP is really a documentation process to see if you're ready and have your documents together to get the money. For the first time in my career, over 30 years, there's never been an opportunity for you to borrow money and not have a credit check. So really, this really is about making sure you have all your documents in order so that you can obtain the opportunity of PPP. We'll be using our CTB PPP online application, which we believe really makes this process simple. And then we'll talk about your submission. All of this tonight is really in your best interest. Deidre spoke earlier about if you have any questions, to make sure you put it in the chat, and we'll go through and make sure that we answer those questions either tonight at the end of the program or in the submission that we'll send to you via email. Either way, this is your chance to speak to the professionals to get your PPP loan approved. So without further ado, we'll jump into the program, and our first presenter is Chris Jones. Mr. Jones, you can take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Daniel. Welcome again to the participants to the webinar today, this evening, I should say. We're very eager to share information with you that we think will be helpful in your application for a PPP loan. We've looked at over 300 loans the last couple of weeks, and we've seen a number of scenarios, and we think that this webinar will provide very good insight that will help your application process go through very smoothly. At least that's our objective. So we'll start with one of the most important steps, which is to identify your business types. What you're looking on the screen here now are the 4 common business types that we see from applicants for the PPP loan. The first is a solopreneur, which many of you may commonly be referred to as a sole proprietorship. This is for self-employed individuals. The next is the corporations. It can be either S Corp or C Corp corporations. And then there's the LLC, which is a limited liability company, and it's somewhat of a hybrid because depending on your tax filing, you may do something similar to the solopreneur, or you may do something similar to the S Corp or C Corp. And then, of course, finally, there is the partnership, which is usually, a member, at least 2 members or 2 owners of an organization. So what documents do you need? Let's move to the next slide. What are the required documents for my business? Again, depending on the business type, certain documents will be required. But there are 2 broad categories of documents that will be required. The first set of documents is what we use to identify you as the customer. And then the second set of documents are essentially tax filings, and you use those tax filings to do your actual loan calculation. Let's move to the next slide. The first set of required documents, as I indicated, is the documents we use to identify you as a customer, and it varies based on your business type. If, for instance, you're a solopreneur, sole proprietorship, we would need a form of ID, a government issued ID, such as a driver's license or a passport. If you are an LLC, we will need your operating agreement. The operating agreement kind of spells out the terms between the members of the LLC, and it indicates who can actually bind the organization. So it's important that we have that document. The second document is the Irs Form SS4, employee identification number notification letter. This is a letter that you would have gotten from the IRS when you applied for a tax ID for your business. In case you can't put your hand on it, we'll provide some information on how you can access a replacement of that so that you'll be able to upload that document along with your application. Then that's what's called the Certificate of Good Standing. This is a document that you can get from the Secretary of State. Usually if you're a corporation, every year you have to pay an annual registration fee for your organization. And then finally, that's what's called a borrower's resolutions for authorized signer. Once we've approved your loan, and we will issue you a promissory note, and we need to know who's authorized to sign that promissory note. This borrower resolutions gives us the person who's authorized to do such. For the corporations, all of the documents are the same as the LLC, with the exceptions of the bylaws. And the bylaws, much like the operating agreement, is agreement between the various owners of the organization. And as I indicated before, it tells who can bind the organization. So these documents that you're looking at here are documents that I indicated before that helps the bank to identify who the customer is. Next slide. And before I get into the second set of documents, we thought that we would discuss how you determine your maximum eligible loan amount. To do that, there are 4 components that first establish what is your payroll cost. And when we get to the documents, we'll indicate where you can find these components. The first is just the gross wages and compensation paid to the employee, or if you are a sole proprietor, paid to the individual owner of the business. To that is added any employee retirement benefits that are paid. If there's a 401k plan or any type of plan, benefit plan for the employee, that amount is added to your gross wages. And then there's what's called the your employee health insurance. If you made provision for health insurance for your employees, that cost is also added to the total. And then finally, if you are paying state employment insurance on behalf of your employees, that is also added to the total. And the 4 of those components will yield your annual payroll cost. Now, with that annual payroll cost, there's a simple formula that is used to determine the actual loan amount. You would take that annual payroll cost and divide it by 12, and that will give you what's called the average monthly payroll amount. And this is something you will see when you're filling out your application when it asks you for the loan information. That average monthly payroll amount is then multiplied by 2.5 to give you your eligible loan amount. So this is the formula for determining how much you are eligible to borrow through the PPP plan. Now let's move to the next slide, and we'll show you where some of those components can be found on the various tax forms for your particular business type. If you are a solopreneur, a sole proprietorship, your 2019 1040 Schedule C is the document that you would use to begin to calculate your payroll. And notice in the first bullet points it says no employees. If it's no employees, that means it's a single owner. And then if you are a sole proprietorship but you actually have employees, then the calculation is determined using your Form 941. And the Form 941 is a form that you use to report your payroll tax withholdings for your employees. Now, there's a rule to keep in mind. Some sole proprietorship with employees may actually pay their employees using the 1099s. The 1099 cannot be included as a part of your gross wage calculation. And also there's a limit on the amount of salary you can claim. The max amount is $100,000. Anything over $100,000 cannot be included in that calculation. And so here's a quick formula, which is the same as I indicated in the previous slide. If you're a sole proprietor with no employees, you would simply take line 31 on your Schedule C, plus any benefits or state unemployment insurance. You divide that by 12, as I indicated before, and multiply it by 2.5 to arrive at your maximum loan amount. Now for the LLC, it's much similar to the sole proprietorship. For an LLC, as I indicated before, is somewhat of a hybrid. It just depends on your filing situation. If you're filing as a sole proprietor, then you use the same calculation as I indicated before. The tax document you will need is the Irs Form 1040, Schedule C. And on line 31, it shows your net profit, and that net profit for a single member LLC represents your gross payroll. If you are an LLC and you have employees, then the document you need is your Irs Form 941. Again, that's the form you use to file to the IRS for your payroll tax withholdings. Again, for the LLC, the rules are the same. If you're paying employees with 1099, that cannot be included as a part of your payroll. And also there's a cap on individual salaries of $100,000. The formula again here for calculating your eligible loan amount for an LLC with no employees, just as single as you take line 31, or if you have employees, you take the sum of your 2019 quarterly 941s plus any benefits, plus any state employment insurance to get your annual payroll cost, which you will then divide by 12 and multiply by 2.5 to arrive at your eligible loan amount. So it's a very simple calculation. The key is to know which documents you need based on your business type. So I'll just repeat, for the sole proprietorship or solopreneur, it's your 1040 Schedule C. If you have no employees, if you have employees, is your Irs 941. And the same would apply for a single member LLC. Your 2019 Form 1040 Schedule C, if it's just a single member LLC. But if it's a LLC with multiple employees, then you would need your quarterly Irs Form 941s. Let's move to the next slides for the two other business types. The two other business types I indicated before is the corporations and the partnerships. For the corporations, again, it's a similar calculation. Some of the forms are similar as well. You would need the 2019 Form 941, as well as if you're corporations, if you're C Corp, you'll file 1120. The reason why the 1120 is important is because that's where you will find your numbers for any benefits or insurance you would have paid. And then if you're an S corporation, you would need your 1120S, and that's where you would find the benefits and insurance information as well. But together with those numbers, you would add it to your payroll from the Form 941 to arrive at your annual payroll. Once again, 1099s, any payments to employees via 1099s are not eligible here. In fact, employees that receive 1099s, they can actually apply for a PPP loan themselves individually, and they would go through the similar process as the sole proprietor. And then the quick formula is the same formula. It doesn't change. You're using your 941s plus the benefits plus your state employment divided by 12 and then multiplied by 2.5. I won't spend a lot of time on the partnerships because we don't really see a whole lot of partnerships but essentially the tax forms here are a little different. You need your 1065, which is the tax income, which is the income tax that partnerships file. And I think on those documents is where, again, you will find your insurance and benefits, and as well as your 941s if you have employees through the partnerships that you're paying. And the calculations for your eligible loan amount is the same for the partnership. You get your annual payroll cost divided by 12 and multiply it by 2.5 for your eligible payroll amount. Next slide. And one of the things that we provided in the portal, which Mr. Bell will talk about in a minute, that will be helpful to you in two phases. One is a borrower's checklist. And this document is used to help you upload the proper documents that will be needed to process your application. You simply take a look at the checklist, pull together those documents, and upload them to the portal. And as I said before, Mr. Bell will walk you through that. The second document is the loan calculation worksheet. Now, this worksheet has the formula that I mentioned before. You simply input the number. For instance, if you're a sole proprietorship, you input the number from line 31, which is a net profit. It will then do the division and multiplication to arrive at your loan amount. If you have a number of employees, the middle gray section there, it shows all of the 941s for each quarter. You simply input those numbers in the worksheet, add the 2 lines below it, which shows your benefits as well as the state unemployment insurance. It will arrive at an annual payroll cost for you, divided by 12 and multiply by 5. So these 2 documents are important in terms of, one, making sure you upload the documents you need so that your application can be expedited. And then secondly, to help you figure out what your actual eligible loan amount will be. Next slide. Again, there's a hyperlink here for, once you go through the portal, there will be a hyperlink there to allow you simply click on it and it'll take you to the tab where you can pull down the checklist, and then another tab where you can pull down the loan calculation worksheet. And I think on this next slide, if you go to the next slide, it shows those 2 hyperlinks. So get yourself organized. Go through that checklist to make sure you can pull all of your documents, and then also use that the loan calculation worksheet to determine your loan amount. Trust me, it will make the process expeditiously and very easy, because what happens often is we find applications where they're missing documents or the calculation is incorrect, and it takes a little time for us to go back to the customer to try and get that information. The next slide. Now I'll turn it over to Mr. Bell, and he will walk you through how to enter your application at the CTB portal.
And actually, before we have Mr. Bell, I do notice that there are some questions starting in the chat. Thank you very much. We would love to hear from you and want to hear from you tonight. We will have an opportunity to address any questions that you have at the end of tonight's presentation. At the appropriate time, we'll turn on that chat feature, but please be sure to type your questions inside the chat from the WebEx control panel. And when time allows, our presenters will definitely address your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Deirdre, for that update, and thank you for the introduction, Chris. As Chris indicated, my name is Jamal Bell, and I am the Senior Underwriter here at Citizens Trust Bank. I'm going to spend my time this evening reviewing the online application process. I'm going to go through each of the sections and share helpful tips that will help you submit your application successfully. The slide that we're looking at right now is actually the login page. I believe that most of the individuals on this call have at least started an application. If you want to continue with the application that you started, you will go back to the CTB Connect website, access the link to the portal, and just log in using your email and password that you initially set up. If there are any individuals who have not started the application process, it's pretty much the same. You want to go to the CTB Connect website. You'll notice down at the bottom underneath where it says log in, you will see the words "don't have an account, sign up." You will click on that link. It will take you to a site to where you can input an email address and establish a password, and those will be your credentials that you use to log on. So what I'm gonna do now is just go ahead and get started. If you can go to the next slide, Triana. All right, so the very first tab that you come to on the application portal is going to be the business info tab. This tab or this section here is really pretty straight to the point. It's really asking you for the pertinent information about your business, things such as the business name, the EIN number, the business address, the industry that the business operates in, etc. One of the things that I'll also point out very quickly is the email address. Make sure that when you input your business email address, that it's an email address that you actually check periodically. And I say that because we are communicating pretty much all correspondence through email platforms because this is an online process. So you want to make sure that you have an email address that you check on a regular basis. Secondarily, you also want to make sure that you input the email address correctly. We've had a couple of cases where folks hadn't been receiving any communication back from us, and we go back to review the application, and it might have been missing a letter in the email address, or some numbers might have been transposed, things of that nature. So please just take the time, make sure that you input the email address correctly and verify it before you send it. On this page, also the business information tab, you will find a series of questions to determine eligibility. And what this is, the SBA has put forth some eligibility requirements, basically, making sure that you are indeed eligible for this loan. One of the things that's most common is they expect that all of the people that will receive PPP funds are not delinquent on any federal loans. So if you have any federal student loans that have a delinquent status, you very well could be determined ineligible. And also if you have any federal income taxes that are in the collection or delinquency process, you may be deemed ineligible. But we'll talk about those things a little bit later. I will bring your attention to the bottom of this slide, and you will see the red markings, and that's in reference to the beneficial owner tab or beneficial owner information. This is also a very important part of the business information section. You want to make sure that you identify all owners who have a 20% interest or more in the business. You want to make sure that those individuals are listed under the beneficial owner section, and you can do so just by clicking on the add new owner feature. I'm gonna mention this throughout the process. One thing to note is that you will notice that there are some questions, certain tabs or fields that have an asterisk mark next to it. Those are there to indicate fields that are required and are needed in order to submit your application successfully. So please be mindful of those. If you have any questions or anything that doesn't necessarily make sense to you, the website also has a lot of helpful tools built into the website, and you can just access those by clicking on the small question mark on each page. It does a very good job of helping you there. The last note that I'll make on this page before we move to the next slide is that if you are an individual and you operate in the, as a sole proprietor or as an independent contractor, you still want to upload or include or fill out the business, the beneficial ownership information on this page. You're just going to use your name, your personal name, your social number, and then you also have to, almost seems like a duplication of effort, but you have to do the same thing on the personal information tab and put your personal information on the next tab. So Tria, if you can go to the next page. Okay, so this is the personal information tab, and this again is very straightforward. It's just asking for your, your first and last name, your social number, your date of birth, and your job title. You will notice that 3 of those 4 are required fields. The date of birth is not. We don't use that information for anything, but it is there for you to input as well. Also on this tab, there is a section that is totally optional. It is the demographic information. And basically, at the end of this program, the SBA, because it is a public or government entity, they might want to collect some statistical information just to use to see how the monies were allocated. For example, they might conclude that 60% of the PPP funds that were dispersed went to African Americans or females, whatever the demographics may be. They just use that really for reporting information just to show where those monies were spent. All right, next tab. And this is a very important tip here. At the top of every page in the application, you will find a progress bar where you can monitor your progress. And if there's any red, if there's a red mark, that is a sign telling you that you have not completed something on that page. So you can see in this picture here that under the business info tab, there's a little red mark there, and that's saying that one of the required fields was not completed. So you would know to go back, do a good job of scrubbing through or reviewing that page, make sure that every question or field with an asterisk has been completed. And that's very important because you will not be allowed to submit the application if there's any open or any required fields that's not completed. So that's a very important tip to make note of. Next slide. Okay, here is the loan information. And if you recall, Mr. Jones actually, kind of referred to this during his part of the presentation. And this is where you will utilize the payroll calculation worksheet to input your average monthly payroll. The system will automatically calculate your maximum eligible loan amount. You cannot input an amount higher than that, even though you may feel that you need more than that. That represents the maximum. Now, for some reason, you don't like, I won't call it free money, but if you don't like, money that's can potentially be forgiven at the end, you can always select a lower dollar amount, but I think that most people will pursue the maximum eligible amount that is allowable. I will make a quick note, and Mr. Jones had it on one of his slides. There's actually two different types of applications. One would be for first draw loan applicants. And by first draw, that would mean that you did not apply, or you did not receive, should I say, any PP financing in round 1 in 2020. So I think that period extended from April through October, I want to say. That's saying that you did not receive any funding in round 1. If you did receive any funding, then you would be filling out the application for the second draw PPP loan. And one thing to note in that section is that it's going to ask you, what is your SBA loan number for the first loan that you receive and the dollar amount. It is critically important that you input that information exactly as it appears on the promissory note, because the SBA has engaged a third party that's kind of doing a due diligence and doing cross-reference checks. And if there's a number that is off, or if there's a dollar amount that doesn't match what they have in the system, then it will tell you that the validation cannot be completed. So I would just maybe take the extra time and actually pull out the promissory note, write down the loan number, write down the loan amount as it is stated, and that should prevent any problems on the back end. I mean, we've seen applications that have been kicked back for a 50-cent difference on the first draw loan amount. So be very mindful of that, and govern yourself accordingly. The other requirement for the second draw PPP loan is that you have to show that your business experienced at least a 25% revenue reduction in 2020 compared to 2019. And you actually have the option to select the quarters. You can do first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, but you have to have comparable quarters whenever you do. So if you chose second quarter 2019, you have to compare that to second quarter 2020, and that has to show, well, the 2020 number should be at least 25% less than what was reported in 2019 in order to be eligible for the loan. So that's really what's important on this page. Last thing I will make note of is that there is a slot or field for authorized signer on this page, and this is where you identify who is authorized to sign on behalf of your corporation. That should be one of the individuals that is listed on the borrower resolution. So you don't want to introduce anybody new that has not been already properly identified as a business owner or someone who is authorized to sign on behalf of the company. If you can go to the next slide, Triana. And we are moving right along. I think we're down to the last 3 slides here. This particular section here, the additional info tab, this is probably one of the most underutilized or less important, I would say, sections of the whole application. And I will tell you, if you do not have a third party, maybe a CPA or an attorney, somebody that you're authorizing to complete the application for you, bypass this section, the contact information section. It's completely optional. Again, it's just really designed to give us authorization or give those individuals authorization to speak to us or to submit financial information to us so we can easily identify those folks. Again, I've seen very few people actually complete this section, and I will tell you just to go ahead and bypass it. Now, there is one thing on this page. There's only one thing on this page that you do need to address, and that's at the bottom of the page. There's a box where you're saying that you agree to the terms and conditions of the application, and that's pretty standard. You click on that box, it's going to bring up all of the electronic disclosures, and you're just going to say I agree, and that's the only thing you have to do on this page. Next slide, please. All right, so at this point, we're coming around third. We're headed to home. This is the Documents tab. And remember, in the beginning of the presentation, I said that if there are any required boxes that are not filled in or completed, then you will not be able to submit your application. I will take it a step further. If there's anything that's open, you will not be able to even get to this Documents tab. And you would know that by the red markings at the top of the page that will give you insight in terms of what sections have any information that might be missing. All right, so once you're on this document page, I will tell you this, that we've done a very good job of trying to identify and make sure that everything that is on the worksheets and checklists that Mr. Jones identified is also listed here on this page. But there might be a couple of situations where something that is listed as required may not apply to your business. For example, let's say that you are a sole proprietor and it's asking for an operating agreement or bylaws. Those things wouldn't apply to you. So what you want to do in that instance is you just want to make a note, maybe using Microsoft Word, something along those lines. You want to save that as a document, and you can upload that explaining why that particular document does not apply to your business. And I say that only because the way the system is set up, you will have to upload a document for everything that is listed here. So you can't, say, well, this doesn't apply to me. I'm not going to upload anything. If you do that, you will not be allowed to submit your application. So just make sure when you go through and it doesn't apply, just follow the tips that I just provided in terms of uploading explanation as to why. All right. Also on this document tab, you will have an option, well, not an option, you will be required to complete the SBA Form 2483. That is the actual SBA application for PPP financing. It's a very short, simple form. Probably won't take you more than 5 minutes to complete. And lastly, you will have the W-9 that is also found on this document page, which again is a very, very fast and easy form to complete, very straight to the point. All right, so now if you can go to the next slide, Ms. Preston, we are at the Submit and Sign tab, and this is the last section of the application. And here is where you actually want to submit your application and sign your application. In order to sign your application, there is a button, if you will, or tab that says Send Signatures for email. You click on that, you will receive 2 emails. So again, going back to the point I made earlier, make sure that the email address that you have identified is the best email that you want to receive communication on, and something that you check on a regular basis. You're going to get those 2 emails. That's going to take you to Adobe, where you're going to actually sign your application electronically. So we will have a signed copy of the application on our records. Once you do that, you can go ahead and press the submit button that you see down at the bottom of the screen, and your application has been officially submitted to Citizens Trust Bank. If you do not, press the submit button, that means your application is not submitted. And you'll be surprised. I get a couple of calls a day where folks might call for an update on their application, and turns out that they never hit the submit button. So it's critically important that to make sure that there are no delays in processing your application, that you do hit that submit button. Next slide. All right, so let's do a very quick recap. So first, you want to make sure that all required information has been completed. You want to make sure that you review the required documents and understand what is required of you. And that's just a matter of going through the checklist that's provided. If for some reason there's a document that is on the checklist that was not listed on the Documents tab in the application, you still will have an opportunity to upload that document. So please take advantage of that, because we don't want to have someone on the review team, notice that, there's a document missing, and then we have to go, communicate back and forth via email. We want to make sure that that application is complete and submitted as quickly as possible, without having to go back and forth. So please be mindful of that. And make sure you refer again back to that checklist and the loan application worksheet. A lot of times we will find that for whatever reason, the loan calculation might have been incorrect, and that can slow down too. Someone will have to contact you, say, okay, this is the number we came up with, or the loan amount we came up with for the loan amount, and just compare notes and just edit the application and resubmit. So we don't want any resubmittals necessarily. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but the quickest way is to try to do it right on the front end. I know some contractors always use that phrase, measure twice, cut once, and that's what we want to do here. We want to make sure that before we hit that submit button, that we verify the information that is accurate, and we want to be able to move forward without any edits along the way. Next tab, please. All right, so as Miss St. Julian indicated, a copy of this webinar, WebEx, and the PowerPoint presentation will be available on the company website at ctbconnect.com. We also have a Q&A at the end of this session, but if everything is not answered, if you got questions, as you start your application tomorrow and you don't have the answers that you need in the presentation or in the WebEx, you can reach out to us at our designated email address, and that is at ctbloanassist@ctbatl.com. If you email us there, make sure that you include your loan number so we can easily identify your application, and someone will respond back to you I would say within a day or two with the answer to your question. Again, just to give some additional tips, don't forget about that progress bar at the top of the page. And please, please, please don't forget to submit your application. And lastly, look out for those Adobe email signatures that will be required for an email signature or electronic signature. Next page. All right, so now you're probably saying, okay, Mr. Bell, what happens next? I've submitted my application. When am I going to get my money, right? So here's a kind of a timeline that's going to help you get at least a point of reference for what the next steps are in the process. I made mention a few moments ago about the review process. So what'll happen once you hit the submit button and your application has been submitted to us, the system will automatically lock your application. And by lock your application, I mean you will no longer be able to go in and make any edits to the application. Once it has the status of locked, that is the signal to our review team that this application is ready for review. Someone will review that application. We're moving very expeditiously, making sure that we can review those within 2 business days. Due to demand, sometimes it could go slightly beyond 2 days, but the goal, our goal and our target is a 2-day turnaround on reviewing those applications. If there's any questions or any missing information, someone from the review team will contact you via email. So again, be on the lookout for emails from Citizens Trust Bank. And it might not say Citizens Trust Bank. It might, the heading will say, we make sure we include PPP or SBA, something in the heading, but it might come from anyone on the review team as an individual. But that person will reach out to you, letting you know what updates need to be made to the application. Once that is done and all issues have been resolved, we then submit the application to the SBA. That is the actual approval. We have an internal process that we have to approve the applications, but your application is not approved until we receive an SBA loan number from the SBA office. So that's critically important. And to give you a little bit of an idea, once we submit to them, we've seen on average up to 3 days to receive that SBA loan number. Sometimes it could be less. There might be an infrequent time where it might extend beyond those 3 days, but on average, I would say we receive the SBA loan number in 3 days. From that point, we begin to engage our loan administration team, who will send you a copy of the promissory note. Now, I did mention that this is a loan and this is a commitment that you're promising to repay. And we'll talk about forgiveness on the next screen, on the next slide. But, this is a commitment or a promise that you're promising, or a commitment to repay, I'm sorry. So you will have to sign a SBA Form 147, which is the promissory note. Once we get that back, within 1 or 2 business days, we should have the loan funded and the money wired to your account. So make sure that, again, one of the documents, I think, were wiring instructions for where you want funding instructions for where you want the money sent once we're ready to fund. So beginning to end is very realistic, depending on how much back and forth takes place, how complete the application is on the front end. That this application can be submitted and funded in less than 2 weeks. So that's kind of the expectation there in terms from a timeline perspective. Next slide. All right, so again, and I made mention of this. This is very much a loan. It's not a grant. It's money that has to be repaid. Now, the good thing is that this is a forgivable loan. And there's some things that, conditions that have to be met in order to get your loan 100% forgiven. So my advice is, and, basically the only thing that you have to do to get your loan forgiven is document that you use the loan for your business in terms of, helping with payroll, helping cover your utilities, or helping cover your rent or mortgage interest. You have to be able to document that. So record keeping is going to be essential once you get these funds. Try to, I would really recommend having a separate account so it's no commingling of funds. It can be clearly designated that these funds were used for my business. So that would be my recommendation. Some folks might take it, others may not. But at a bare minimum, you want to be able to make sure that you have your ducks in a row and able to document how those monies were spent. All right, next slide, please. So thank you for your time. It has been our pleasure to share this information with you on today. Ms. St. Julian, I am going to turn the floor back over to you and take us to the next phase of the presentation.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Bell. Thank you, everyone. The current time is 6:52. That definitely concludes the presentation portion of this webinar. Currently, the chat feature is open to address any questions. Remember to type your questions in the chat box from the WebEx control panel so our presenters can address them. Just to let everyone know, tonight's presentation has been recorded, and within 24 hours, you will receive a recorded version of tonight's presentation, along with the answers, questions and answers that were discussed. So please allow some time, but that will be sent to you by email from at the email address you provided. Thank you, Mr. Daniels. I have forwarded, so far we've received 4. We can start with question 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. St. Julian. The first question we have is, what if you started in 2020 and you received PPP last year and are applying again?
Is there...
You received PPP in 2020 and you are applying again. Yeah, that would constitute what we're calling a second draw. Your first PPP loan would be considered your first draw, and then that would be a second draw. And the requirement or threshold that you have to meet there, and I think Mr. Bell mentioned it, is that there's what's called a revenue reduction requirement, which means that you take a quarter in 2019 and a quarter in 2020. It can be any of the calendar quarters, and you must show a reduction of 25% in your gross receipts from 2019 to 2020. If you show a reduction of 25% in your gross receipts, then you are eligible for a second draw.
Okay. The next question, let's see, is this presentation being recorded? And if so, will the recording be available to attendees? And yes and yes. I think Ms. St. Julian addressed that. This presentation is being recorded, and you will receive a link to the recording and the presentation via email probably tomorrow. Okay, let's see, next question. Regarding 2019 tax documents, if you started your company, nope, we did that one. Let's see here, go down. Okay, we have a customer who completed the application process, but didn't see the requirements. Will I be able to go back to my application and find this information? If so, how? Jamal, you want to address that question?
I definitely can. In order to re-access your application, you would log into the portal, the SBA portal, and the link for that is found on the CTB Connect website. You would input your email address and password that you established, and you will see applicate and I guess an option to either start a new application or continue with an existing application. In this instance, you will just continue with the existing application, and you should be able to forward through and get to the documents tab, and you will see the listing for the required documents. I will point out, and I've seen this in a few instances, and I think pretty much reached out to all those individuals. Some folks actually chose the business application as opposed to the SBA application. If you fall into that category, you're going to have to complete the SBA application. So you have to start the process over with the SBA application. You will know the difference between the two. If you didn't see any eligibility questions related to the SBA, or if you didn't see anything asked about payroll, then you would know that you completed the wrong application. But again, we've pretty much addressed that with most of the applicants. But just be mindful of that when you go back in to review your application.
And Fred, if I can go back to the first question you asked, I thought I heard you said something about the company and started in 2020. The rule is you would have to be in business before February the 15th of 2020 to be eligible. So that if in that particular instance the business was started in 2020, would have to be started before February 15th of 2020. I just wanted to clarify that because I heard you say started in 2020.
Okay. We have a question that the customer states that their tracking bar does not show any red. What should they do? Jamal, you want to take that one?
Yes, sir. If it's not showing any red, then that means that you have completed all of the sections. Now, I will say that what might be helpful, because some folks may not see it initially. If you want a true indicator, if you completed all sections, try clicking on documents. If you click on the document tab and it doesn't come up, it should flash red. You should see the red bar at the top. Sometimes you don't see it until you try to submit get to the documents tab. So I would start there. Go click on documents, and that should be a good indication of whether or not you have actually completed all the sections.
Okay. Let's see here. The next question is using the funds to pay business-related bills acceptable? Let's see. Chris, you want to take that one?
Yeah, there are specific business-related expenses that I think are eligible for being satisfied with proceeds from the loan. One is any rent expense, what's the second category? If you have any loans, any interest on the loans, you can use the proceed to pay for those pay those expenses. And I think in this second round, and I may have to confirm this, I think that there's some certain expenses related to equipment that you may also be able to use the proceeds. But if you leave that question out for us, or if we can get a name for that, we can give you the exact answer for that. But I know rent expense, any interest on debt, and then I think this second time around there may be some repairs related to certain equipment that may be eligible.
You also can use it for utilities, and if they had to make any PPP upgrades, the proceeds could be used for those two categories also. All right, let's see. Just trying to wade through the questions here. Here we go. There was a question that, let's see, someone received an approval and signature document, SBA Form 147, that they signed, and have not heard anything since. And then their question is, what are they to do?
Well, I'll just say
Okay.
please call the help, get that help number. Go ahead, Jamal.
Yeah, I was just saying, if you signed the 147, I can say with the utmost confidence that our loan admin team is moving very expeditiously. And either you want, like Chris was saying, you might want to follow up, because we've seen some folks who have entered the funding instructions incorrectly, and the wires have been sent but have been returned back to us. So just go in and submit a question to that CTB Loan App Assist email address, just to get an update.
Okay. There's a question. Let's see. Can you use the 2020 941s, or is 2019 941s required? Chris, you want to take that one?
Yes, you can use the 2020 941s for this round of the PPP. We just used 2019 in the examples, but 2020 941s you can use.
Okay. Look like we have a duplicate question to a certain extent. It says, what if I started my LLC in February of 2020? Well, it has to be by February 15th of 2020. But then the question goes forward to say, I do not have 2019 tax forms. What are they to do? Chris, you want to take that one?
Well, they would have to use that 2020 if they don't. If the business just started, I mean, you would have to use that 2020 if the business just started, hopefully prior to February 15. Then the only thing they will have is their 2020 tax information.
Okay. All righty. I think that's the same question. What if you started a business in January 2020, received PPP in 2020, and applying again but don't have 2019? I think you just addressed that question. We talked about using business-related funds. Can that reduction, this is a separate question, Chris, can the revenue reduction be in the year 2020 since there was not a business in 2019?
Well, that's going to be, well, here's the thing though. You can't have a revenue reduction unless you had to have been in business in 2019. So I'm not certain if I understand how that question would work. Because usually the revenue reductions apply to the second draw, which would mean that in 2020, you actually applied for a PPP loan, in which case, if you did apply in 2020, that would have meant that you were in business in 2019. So that's the only instance in where the revenue reduction question comes into play. So not having any 2019 information implies that perhaps either you weren't in business in 2019, or in which case, if you weren't in business in 2019, then that seems like the draw that you're making now would be your first draw.
Could they, in that situation, they could have a 941 for the first quarter of 2020, but then they wouldn't have another 941 until the first quarter of 2021. And so that revenue, the only way that they could be approved, it seems like, is that they would, the only comparative numbers that they would have would be first quarter 2020 and first quarter 2021. But they'd have to have that turned in on the absolute last day that they could apply, which would be March 31st over March 31st. I think that's really the only opportunity that could work in that scenario.
Yeah, that one is pretty interesting. I think we probably should just get clarification on that.
Yeah.
Because just because the fact that you could have started a business, January 2nd, 2020, and been eligible would suggest that there might be a possible way to still apply for a second draw loan. We just need to research what circumstances or situations that would fall under.
Right. Okay. So we'll try to get you an answer on that one. I think that's one of those that stumps the professionals. Let's see. Moving down. We have a two-part question. It says, considering this is my first time, oh, jumped away from me. Considering this is my first time applying, can I apply for a second loan before the round ends? And then number two, I was not on our payroll earlier, 2019 and 2020. Can I submit my income to meet the maximum loan amount? I'm not quite understanding that question.
I don't quite understand the question.
Yeah. Can you resubmit that one for us if you're still on the line? That one's a little confusing for us. I can't really push that out to our two experts because I don't understand it. So if you don't mind resubmitting that question with a little more clarity, I think we'll attempt to answer it for you, but it's not clear to us right now. Same question, can there be a revenue reduction in 2020 since there was not a business in 2019? We're going to work on that one for you. Let's see. I know that it states that the business has to have been started by February 15, 2020. I started my business in February of 2019, but applied for the Secretary of State LLC on February 19th, but can prove business activity prior to that. Can I apply? Mr. Jones. Can she still apply where she says she can prove business activity on before February 15th, but she didn't apply to the Secretary of State to obtain her LLC until February 19th of 2020?
That's what the rule said. If you can demonstrate some payroll activity prior to February 15th, then you would be eligible. However, I would caution, I think we've had a couple of applications where the SBA did not approve for established date formation. And in at least one of those instances, the formation was after February the 15th. So that may be one that we may have to work with the SBA to get approved, but by the rules, if you can establish that you, through payroll documentation, that you were in business before February 15th, then you would be eligible.
Okay.
Hey, Mr. Daines, I got an answer for the one question about the entities in business in 2019.
Okay.
All right, so on the application, it says for entities not in business during 2019, but in operation on February 15th, 2020, applicants must demonstrate the gross receipts in the second, third, or fourth quarters of 2020 were at least 25% lower than the first quarter of 2020. So you can compare any of the other 3 quarters to the first quarter if you were not in business in 2019.
All right, say that one more time. That was important information.
All right, I'm gonna read it as it's stated here on the application. Then I'll interpret it again. It says for entities not in business during 2019, but in operation on February 15th, 2020, applicants must demonstrate that gross receipts in the second, third, or fourth quarter of 2020 were at least 25% lower than the first quarter of 2020. So it's just basically saying that as opposed to doing a comparable quarter of 2019, you will have to compare either the second, third, or fourth quarter revenue number to the first quarter revenue number of 2020. And that number has to be at least 25% less.
All right, great. Because we probably had five questions for that same question. So um, 5 chats where they mentioned that same question. So hopefully that answers for several of the people who are on the phone right now. All right, let's see. Let's go down. And okay, let's see. We were 1 quarter. All right. Can you show revenue reduction from 1 quarter to another in the same 2020 calendar year? Yes. We just answered that one. Okay, Chris, we got a question for you. What are the forms for the 501c3 corporation second draw?
The forms would be, everything is based on payroll. So if you have employees, it's going to be your 941s in terms of the documents needed for the payroll calculation. If it's a 501c, and I think we talked about this before, where you have employees and they're simply contract employees, then obviously those would not be eligible. One of the things that we didn't point out that is also eligible for documentations, not only for 501cs, but any of the other business entities, if by chance you use a third-party tax service like ADP or Paychecks or some others to process your payrolls, payroll reports from those organizations can be used as documentation as well to substantiate your payroll and do the calculation to determine your eligible loan amount.
All right. We have a question here, another tax question, Chris. If you are planning on using your 2020 taxes, do you have to wait to finish the loan process?
Do you have to wait to finish the loan?
If you are planning on using your 2020 taxes, do you have to wait to finish the loan process?
And maybe I'm not understanding the question. I assume if you're doing your 2020 taxes, if they started that process, then they can provide the actual tax return, whatever it is, what is it, Schedule C or whatever. I don't know if you have to wait, but we are going to need that tax return. Are they saying, do I have to wait until I get my tax returns done to submit the application, or what are they actually saying they need to wait for?
They said if you are planning on using your 2020 taxes, I'm assuming to apply for the PPP, do you have to wait to finish the loan process? That's what the question says.
Yeah. If you're going to use your 2020, we're going to need that tax form. So I guess if it's not ready, then you'd have to wait.
Okay. Let's see here. They're coming in fast and furious. Yeah, let's see. So there was a follow-up. So we only do 1 quarter comparisons for 2019 and 2020. That is correct. There's a question regarding the financial information. Let's see here. The request is for February 2020 financials. I had financials submitted through a Square business account. Other financials were placed within a joint account with my wife. How do I submit for that scenario? So I'm gonna read that one again. The question is regards to the financial information. The request is for February 2020 financials. He says that I have financials submitted through a Square business account, and the other financials were placed within a joint account with my wife. How do I submit for that scenario? So it sounds as though there are two accounts that he's trying to combine to create his revenue. One from a Square business account, I guess, that swipes for a credit card, and then the others that were placed in a joint account with his wife that probably represents checks or cash that were submitted on behalf of the business. So the question is, how do I submit for that scenario, Mr. Jones?
Yeah, I could take a stab at it,
Take a
CJ.
stab, yeah.
Okay.
I think it all boils down to being able to document the numbers. You know, so for example, if he had the Square, you probably do some type of printout from that and show the 3 months of receipts from there, and then utilize bank statements for the information related to the joint bank account. That I think is a lot of, I won't say a lot, but there is wiggle room. The big thing that we just need to be able to do is document the different sources. Now, I will say that if the loan amount is greater than 150, whatever information that is provided needs to be attested to. And you do that by signing the first page of that document and initially every page thereafter. So that's the rule there. It's just being able to document and, you know, whatever the supporting information is that was used to calculate the revenue numbers.
Okay. Got another question here. If I do not apply for the first round loan, can I apply for a second loan within this second round? And as a business owner, I was not on 2019 payroll. Can I use my personal taxes for 2019 to add to this loan? Well, for all intents and purposes, if you hadn't applied the first time, then no, you cannot apply for a second round. I'm not quite understanding, because essentially you have to apply. You have to have applied in 2020 for the first round of PPP. If you don't have a first round PPP approval number and amount, then you can't apply for the second second round. In terms of the second draw, excuse me, you can apply for the first time in the second round, but you had to apply previously to jump into the second quote draw.
If I understand it correctly, I mean, they would just be making the first draw.
Right.
It would just be a first draw. And
yeah,
since they didn't apply.
I think he's saying, the way I interpret it, and I could be wrong, he's saying, okay, if I apply for a first draw, can I get a second draw as well in this same round? And the answer to that would be
no.
Would be no.
Right. Right.
No, that's what you're asking. You can't get two.
Right. You can apply if you didn't apply in, essentially, if you did not apply in 2020, you can apply in 2021. And we've talked about earlier that as long as you have a 25% reduction that can be documented from your first quarter to your fourth quarter in comparison to your fourth quarter, third, or second quarter, any one of those quarters compared to your first, that there's a 25% reduction, you should be okay in terms of applying for a second round PPP loan for the first time. Hopefully made that clear. All right. We have one question and we're still got a little bit of time. Let's see. Here we go. For the same question, with my 2019 Schedule C qualify? And I'm thinking as long as if you compare your 2018 what was that, 2019 Schedule C and your 2020 Schedule C, and there was a 20%, 25% reduction in those two schedules, I think you should be fine. I don't see why you would not. All right. Any additional questions? I think we've gone through all. If I missed your question, please resubmit it in the chat. I think I got them all, but I'm human and I could have missed one.
Thank you, Fred. Yes, you have hit them all at this time.
Okay.
There are no further questions in the
All right.
chat box. Thank you. We wish everyone good luck. Thank you so much for putting your trust in Citizens Trust Bank. Good luck to everyone. Good night.